Orders of the day.
Private members' business, a debate at second reading on Bill C-279, an act to amend the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Criminal Code, gender identity and gender expression, standing in the name of Mr. Garrison, Esquimalt Juan de Foucault.
We're resuming debate. Okay. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for that. I'm pleased today to have a few minutes to discuss Bill C-279, an act to amend the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Criminal Code. Quite simply, Bill C-279 seeks to provide human rights protections to a group that remains a significant victim of discrimination in our society. And specifically, Bill C-279 seeks to amend the Canadian Human Rights Act to add both gender identity and gender expression as prohibited grounds of discrimination. It seeks to amend the Criminal Code to include gender identity and gender expression to the definition of identifiable groups in its provisions on hate propaganda, and it seeks to add gender identity and gender expression to the Criminal Code's list of aggravating factors that affect sentencing. As the Ontario Human Rights Commission has noted, in quote, there are arguably few groups in society today who are as disadvantaged and disenfranchised as the transgendered community. Transphobia combined with the hostility of society to the very existence of transgendered people are fundamental human rights issues, end quote. And given that the purpose of the Canadian Human Rights Act is to provide protection to the most vulnerable groups in Canadian society, it's my sincere hope that all members of this House will join the Liberal Party in supporting these logical and necessary modernizations of our existing laws. It's our belief that the amendments contained in C-279 are an appropriate way to improve the human rights protections of a socially and economically marginalized group. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, I want to make a brief comment with regard to human rights in Canada. 30 years ago, Canada created the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And this was a very important initiative to protect the rights of Canadians. And at the time, the rights were not as strong as today. The Charter was a tool and an initiative.
These basic rights, et pour donner aux citoyens,
and to give Canadians the means to have legislative protection set out in the Constitution itself. And I wonder, and I would like to ask why the other political parties, the NDP and the Conservatives, did not celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Why did they ignore this anniversary this year? It was a very courageous step taken at the time to promote the Charter, but now it is an integral part of our society to respect the rights and freedoms of Canadians. It's no longer something that is divisive. Rather, it is not shocking either. Why did the other parties not say a few words to celebrate this 30th anniversary, which is so important in the history of our country.
Moving back to Bill C-279, this is the culmination of years of effort and already represents the will of this House. Since 2005, this bill was introduced on 6 occasions by the member for Burnaby Douglas of the NDP. It was introduced once by my honourable colleague from Vancouver Centre, and most recently by the member for Esquimalt-Juan de Fuca. In 2010, the bill, which at that time was Bill C-389, was passed by the House of Commons with no amendments, only to die on the order paper after being referred to the Senate. The statistics on transphobia, which my colleague from Esquimalt-Juan de Fuca pointed out eloquently in his remarks, are as striking as they are disturbing. Indeed, 95% of transgendered students feel unsafe at school, and 9 out of 10 have been verbally harassed due to their gender expression. 95%. If this was one of our sons or daughters in school feeling unsafe, certainly, Mr. Speaker, all of us would take action to protect those rights. Furthermore, statistics from the United States reveal the significant incidence of de facto discrimination experienced by transgendered individuals. A recent national survey found that transgendered respondents experienced unemployment at twice the rate of the general population and were significantly more likely to be homeless and low-income earners. This is just wrong. Attitudes in society must change, and this bill is directed to that result. And as well, and this is a shocking statistic, 97% of transgendered respondents in a recent survey reported experiencing harassment or mistreatment at work on the basis of gender identity or expression. And I'm quite certain we can all agree that this too is just simply wrong. Because gender identity and gender expression refers not to an individual's biological sex or sexual orientation, but rather the individual's inner knowing of being male, female, both, or neither. I believe it is essential that Parliament send a clear and unambiguous message that this is a crucial equality rights issue. Adopting the amendments proposed in Bill C-279 is not just about ensuring transgendered Canadians enjoy the legal protections according to other targeted groups. It's also an opportunity for Parliament to send an unequivocal message of support to transgendered Canadians, that we in this House affirm their identity and acknowledge their struggles. This is a humanitarian step. This costs nothing. This is in alignment with the basic principles of fairness, humanity, equality, inclusion, respect. And so this is an opportunity for each and every parliamentarian to really look into their hearts and to express their values and principles of inclusion. As my honourable colleague from Mount Royal noted, a failure to explicitly refer to gender identity in the Canadian Human Rights Act leaves transgendered people invisible. By amending the Canadian Human Rights Act to include gender identity and gender expression as prohibited grounds for discrimination, Parliament would enable the Canadian Human Rights Commission to keep statistical account of incidents of discrimination against transgendered individuals. The ability to compile and analyze such data would be crucial in confronting the scourge of discrimination that transgendered people continue to face in our society, and might also guide educational efforts in the broader community. And we know well, Mr. Speaker, that having clarity and then being able to measure and compile statistics has been essential in Canada's efforts to reduce other forms of discrimination against Jews, discrimination against people that are other-abled, and in many other cases. What we don't measure, we cannot have objectives to improve, and what we don't have objectives, we will unlikely to achieve that goal. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud that in 1996, guided by the principles of equality, justice, and the fundamental need to protect vulnerable groups in Canadian society so that we may prosper together, the Liberal Party amended the Canadian Human Rights Act to include sexual orientation as a prohibited ground of discrimination. It's now time to carry on the fight against discrimination by making it clear that gender identity and gender expression are also prohibited in our society. Our job as members of Parliament are to do our very best for the common good and our very best to show respect and inclusion and humanitarian care for all members of our society. And this group that this bill addresses, its turn has come, and so that's why I encourage all members on the opposite side of the aisle to also support this bill. Thank you.
Resuming debate, the